1 in every 5 new cars sold in Mexico last year was made by a Chinese brand, and 5 years ago that number was basically zero. Let me put that statistic in perspective for you. In 2019, Chinese brands had less than 1% of Mexico's passenger car market. By 2024, they were selling roughly 300,000 units a year and commanding about 20% of total sales. That is not gradual growth. That is a category being rewritten in real time. I'd argue this is one of the most dramatic market share shifts we've seen in the global auto industry this decade, faster even than Tesla's early rise in Norway, and Norway had massive government subsidies pushing it along. Mexico didn't. Chinese brands got there on price, on technology, and on a willingness to actually show up and compete. The names leading the charge are ones you already know from this channel: BYD and Great Wall Motor. BYD bringing its hybrid and EV lineup, Great Wall leaning on its Haval SUV range which, frankly, punches well above its price tag. Mexican buyers aren't being tricked into these cars. They're choosing them because the value proposition is genuinely hard to argue with. So why Mexico specifically? I think there are 3 real reasons, and one that people underestimate. First, price. A well-equipped Chinese SUV in Mexico can land at a price point that makes a comparable Ford or Chevrolet look expensive. We're talking meaningful gaps, not just a few $100s. Second, fuel savings. Mexican buyers I've seen quoted in reporting consistently mention the running cost advantage, whether that's a hybrid cutting their petrol bill or a full EV eliminating it almost entirely. Third, the tech. Features that in a European or American brand would cost you a premium trim level, large touchscreens, advanced driver assistance, panoramic roofs, come standard or near standard on Chinese models at entry pricing. Now here's the underestimated one. Chinese brands actually invested in local presence. Dealership networks, after-sales service, Spanish-language support. That sounds boring, but it's what killed previous attempts by other newcomers. I'll be honest. I underestimated how quickly Chinese brands would solve the service infrastructure problem in export markets. I thought it would take longer. It didn't. And that lesson probably applies everywhere else they're targeting next. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room: tariffs. Mexico has introduced new trade measures targeting Chinese auto imports, and there's ongoing pressure from the U.S. side too, given how closely the two economies are linked through USMCA. On paper, tariffs should slow this down. Higher import costs get passed to consumers, the price gap narrows, and suddenly that BYD doesn't look quite as cheap next to a Nissan Sentra. I think the tariff risk is real but probably not fatal, and here's why. Chinese automakers have been anticipating this for 2 or 3 years. BYD has been scouting manufacturing locations. Great Wall already has assembly experience in multiple countries. The playbook isn't to keep shipping finished cars forever. It's to get close enough to local production that tariffs become irrelevant. We've seen this exact strategy work in Brazil and Thailand. Industry analysts who follow Mexico closely are still bullish on Chinese growth there even with the new duties in place, and I'd lean the same way. The brands that survive this tariff moment will be the ones that treat Mexico not as an export destination, but as a market worth planting a flag in permanently. Here's where I land on this. Mexico in 2024 is a proof of concept for every other market Chinese brands are eyeing: Southeast Asia, Latin America, parts of Eastern Europe. The formula is repeatable: undercut on price, over-deliver on features, build service infrastructure faster than anyone expects, then hedge against tariffs by moving production closer to the customer. What I'm watching for in 2025 is whether BYD specifically announces any kind of Mexican assembly commitment. If they do, the 20% share doesn't plateau, it grows. If they don't and tariffs bite hard, you might see a temporary dip before the rebound. Either way, the idea that Chinese brands are a niche curiosity in Latin America is finished. They are the market now, or close enough to it that the distinction barely matters. For Western automakers, the comparison I keep coming back to is what Japanese brands did to American manufacturers in the 1980s: steady, methodical, quality-driven displacement. Except this time it's moving faster and the technology gap, especially on electrification, is running in China's favor. That should make every boardroom in Detroit and Stuttgart genuinely uncomfortable. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think tariffs actually stop this? Or is Chinese dominance in emerging markets now inevitable? I read everything. If you want to see me do a full head-to-head between the Haval H6 and whatever European or American SUV it's actually displacing in these markets, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments which matchup you want first.